Welcome to the Music Education Podcast. I'm Chris of the Chris Woods Groove Orchestra, and this podcast is brought to you by the Soundstorm Music Education Hub and our sponsor, the Longy School of Music. In this episode, I chat with Matt from Musician of the Month. Now, Musician of the Month does pretty much what the title suggests. It provides a Musician of the Month for you to offer to your students as a point of reference for further investigation or as simply a point of inspiration. And of course, that is seriously fertile ground for some philosophical conversation and analysis because, let's face it, choices like that are the big responsibilities that music educators face every day. Because who do you put forward? What type of music do you put forward more of? Is there a music that's more important or less important? It's a really fascinating conversation, and actually I'd really like to further this conversation. So if you are a music educator and you are interested or you feel passionate about some of the things that have been spoken about here, you don't have to agree or disagree, but you might be interested in having a chat with me about it, then please consider getting in touch. contact@chriswoodsgroove.co.uk. I hope you enjoy listening.
I've got a few notes here. So if I'm turning a page, that's because I've just spent the last hour jotting some bits and bobs down. So hopefully,
nice.
Hopefully there might be something that I might be able to say that might be useful, but we'll see.
That's a fantastic start. Actually, I think I would love just to start it on that. Hopefully, I might have something useful to say. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. I think that's quite a helpful little humble start for a music educator. Anyway,
well, this is it.
Rather than, I'm always slightly nervous of the ones that believe that they've got lots of things to say.
Yeah, well, because I'm still a primary school teacher. At the end of the day, I'm still teaching. I'm not one of those people that I've not got 3 degrees and working for some big company. This is kind of something that I've put together whilst teaching. So,
but
yeah,
I reckon. By the way, we've totally started. By the way, now.
Oh.
So, but
hi, my name's Matt, and I'm.
But why I think people are going to really like this episode is because that you're not a music education conglomerate, and I think people would probably be really interested by even how you sort of ended up doing what you're doing with the monthly composer thing anyway, because that's
sure.
It's it must be enjoyable, isn't it, to do, or is it just stressful?
No, it's not stressful at all. No, I mean, I like I said, I am part-time now, so I am able to spend quite a bit of time making the things that I need to make. So yeah, I feel like we need a bit more of a formal start. I feel like I've sort of gone into this and I don't know where I am or what I'm doing. So
that's good.
From here,
you're disorientated.
3 minutes 20. This is where it starts now. Okay, hang on a minute.
Jumping into it. Where am I?
Right.
Yeah. Well, go on then, Matt. I think you want to introduce yourself, don't you? Go for it.
Is that all right? Yeah. So my name's Matt. I'm a primary school teacher in Nottingham, and I also run a website which I have sort of designed and am still currently developing, called Musician of the Month. It's actually musicianofthemonth.co.uk, and it really is a website where the aim really is to try and diversify the musicians that children study in school from Key Stage 1 up to Key Stage 2. So that's kind of me in a nutshell at the moment.
Wonderful. Wonderfully concise too. It's a hell of a responsibility, I think, you doing that. Which was kind of as I said to you, was like one of the reasons for wanting to chat about it, because you're sort of essentially, if you do become a music education conglomerate, which I hope you do,
Yes.
you could be, curating, if you like, the musicians that music educators provide to their students, right? Is that, so, I mean,
yeah, I mean,
it would sort of wake me up in the night with like night terrors.
Not really. I mean, that how it started. It started off very organically. So it started off with me kind of teaching in schools, and to be fair, I never really enjoyed teaching music. I've never been classically trained as a musician or anything like that. And when it came to sort of teaching music, yes, there'd be those lessons where you talk a bit about tempo and pitch and staff notation and things that I was sort of a little bit genuinely uncomfortable with as a sort of non-specialist. And then, through the curriculum, it was kind of like, okay, we're going to study this particular composer, and then do a little bit of world music and all the rest of it. And I just found the whole process kind of quite uncomfortable and not very inspiring. This is pre-model music curriculum. And just being a teacher on your Sunday nights, you'd go and try and download something off a reputable subscription website. And, like one of the resources I saw was, it had thousands and thousands of downloads, and it was just composer of the week. And every week of the year, children will be told a different composer. And I was like, what? Is this really going to inspire the next generation of musicians? A different composer every single week? I mean, I couldn't name 40 composers, let alone teach 40 composers in 1 year to some children. And I just sort of found that the music offering about musicians was fairly poor. So I was working at the time in inner city Nottingham in a 3-form entry school with 95% children with English as an additional language coming from all over the world. So we had about 52 different languages, a large majority of those children from sort of from Pakistan, India, but also from Poland, various places as well. And I felt like what we were giving them wasn't enough. There wasn't much representation for them, but also they weren't being exposed to other musicians from around the world either. So I kind of took it on myself to start creating this resource for my school. And then over time, started to realize actually other teachers might benefit from this. So it was never anything where I sort of stepped into it going, I have this power and thus, I have responsibility. So it's very organically made and created. Now, as more schools kind of liked what I was doing, then gradually that sense of responsibility started to hit a little bit. And I'd already started organising these musicians a little bit. And when the model music curriculum came out, it was quite interesting because there was this listening list, a list of musicians that children should listen to, and genres and traditions and various things like that. And I was kind of like, wow, I'm doing this already. Everyone, I'm doing this. I felt really like I'm ahead of the game. This is great.
Fantastic validation from the government.
Exactly.
You're on track, man.
I was like, it's almost like I wrote this thing. I could probably lie and say it. And I looking through them, there were some musicians that I'd sort of chosen and that they had as well, but then there were some differences as well. And I think the one thing it sort of helped me do a little bit was to sort of compartmentalize things as such. So it was kind of like, okay, so the 3 areas are Western classical musicians, then it's traditions, and it's pop music. So you've kind of got these 3 areas. And when I looked at it, it was quite interesting because the weighting of things was still, by the end of Key Stage 2, like with the examples they were given, it was still weighted a little bit more heavily with, Western classical musicians, about 40% of what they would expect children to listen to and to study, 40%. It just sort of made me think, why? Why is it 40%? Why is it more than pop music? Why is it more than traditions from around the world? I don't know why. Is that, that's so it just made me question, okay, yes, we've got these areas, but who says how many from each of those areas we should have? And it kind of made me think, well, you've got Western classical traditions and music, and then you have traditions, which means other. And I didn't want to see it like that. You know, they're all traditions from around the world. So, it did make me think a little bit more and be a bit more thoughtful about who I would choose and why. But in the end, putting this together is kind of, it's a fluid thing. When I've created all the musicians that I currently plan to, I'm certainly not planning on stopping and going, that's it, that's my definitive list, and it can't change. You know, I want to be changing things all the time. I want to be adding things to it, taking things away. So there's a lot of thought that eventually went into that choice of musician. So for example, there's 66 musicians, and it was kind of, okay, well, who do we choose and why? The first thing I wanted to do was go, well, I'm a father of 2 young girls, and I thought straight away it's got to be a 50-50 gender split. So there's exactly half in terms of who's being covered here and there in terms of gender. You know, I care a lot that my 2 children go to school, and that they might be hearing, you know, this man has created this, and this music came from this man, and man has landed on the moon, and all these kind of, you know, messages that they're hearing. And I'm very aware that perhaps in the past, the world favoured men in many ways, and still does. You know, and you look at like the classical musicians that most people will study, and the majority of them are men, because that was the time. That was what was happening at the time. We don't live in that time anymore. We live now. We live in the modern world, where we want to give people the opportunities, and to give them the opportunities means we have to inspire them. So I'm not going to inspire my 2 daughters by banging on about all these men that have done great things in the past. So for me, I think gender was a really big one, first and foremost, to make sure that there was representation there.
Is your music career ready for its next beat? Longy School of Music of Bard College offers a Master of Music in Music Education program online. Longy's top-ranked accredited program is rooted in culturally responsive teaching and designed with the working teacher in mind. Flexible options like asynchronous classes mean you don't have to take time off to pursue your degree. Longy School of Music, located in Boston, Massachusetts, is a leader in centering music as social change, expanding the world's understanding of what a life in music can mean. Our Master of Music in Music Education online alumni go on to do things like advance their teaching licenses, earn higher salaries, found community music organizations, and teach in higher ed. Financial aid is available, so apply today. Learn more at longy.edu/study. That's longy.edu/study.
Matt, can we talk about that before? Because I feel like you've got so much interesting stuff to say that we're just going to hear lots of interesting things. So I'm going to come in and say some irrelevant, boring things to sort of offer a different. No, I just on the gender thing. There's a fascinating sort of devil's advocate question, maybe the idea of redressing the balance, but by presenting history in a different way, right? And I'm totally with you. I have a daughter too. And one of the first things I noticed was, I don't know, when we meet a little dog or we go to stroking a guinea pig at a petting farm, and it's like, oh, what's he doing? Oh, I think he likes it. And, oh, no. It could be a girl. Chris. Like even those really simple sort of biases, programming that everything's male. Yeah. Partly, obviously, because I'm male as well. But I noticed my wife did that as well. It's like we're all sort of programmed to just presume the world is male. If you're redressing the balance, I understand that, because we're inspired, we're drawn to people who with similarities to us, be it how they look or gender or cultural things. But if you're presenting history, right, doesn't that mean you're taking you have to take other things out because there's only so much room, isn't there? So do you end up taking out some really key composers, people who are really important because, sorry mate, we got to get a 50-50 in.
Yeah,
it's not a trick question either.
No, I understand that. And I think because those musicians, it's about a whole school approach to one particular musician for that whole month. So the idea, for example, along with that musician, they would learn about that musician and the time of that musician. So, for example, if they're studying Beethoven in that time, in that particular month, who we have in there, then they will learn about him. But when it comes to a female classical composer, for example, Ethel Smith or Florence Price, then they're learning about them within the context of their barriers that they have had to overcome in order to become a successful musician. So the fact that men dominated classical composition during that time is part of that process of learning and realizing that, yes, although we have this sort of fair representation with the musicians we study, when we go a bit further and we actually study them in depth, so we've created sort of knowledge organizers and quizzes and various activities to go with it, that they are aware of the context in which those people have developed themselves. So within there, it will clearly say, being a female composer was very difficult at that time, and there weren't many that were able to shine through. So I think not just having the superficial kind of like musician list and tick box all of them off, the whole purpose is to find out about that person and what made that person inspirational and what were the barriers that person had to overcome. So whether that is because their gender made them becoming successful musicians more difficult, or perhaps it was because they had a disability that they had to overcome, had to play something differently. Joni Mitchell, whose hand was affected by polio, had to retune how she wanted to play a guitar and learn it differently. So it's going into that musician and sort of identifying what those barriers were and celebrating the fact that they could overcome
So you must
them.
End up, I'm presuming, you talked about like 40% Western classical in the model music curriculum. So I'm guessing if you're going, well, with particular regard to gender of 50-50, I guess you end up far more weighted to popular, right? Because there's just simply far less evidence of, or not evidence, examples of, accessible examples of female composers from Western classical. Well, unless I'm wrong, and there's just this treasure trove.
Yeah. So no, you're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of the Western sort of classical musicians, what I've aimed to do is have one studied per term, and when you look, yes, those ones further back in history, there's not as many. Like I said, we have Florence Price, Ethel Smith, Barbara Strozzi, Grzynia Bakovic from Poland, but then so. But let's not forget about today, like you said, the 21st century. So I've just finished creating a bank of resources for Anna Meredith, the Scottish composer, and I've just gone down a complete wormhole recently of all her work, which is
super cool,
unbelievably cool. Like, just wow! Like, I've just been trapped in that wormhole for such a long time over the last few weeks. And it is that it's like, okay, well, actually, yeah, there's so many modern musicians now. Anna Klein is another one. Delia Derbyshire, someone who sort of wrote the Doctor Who theme tune and was busy into sort of electronics kind of stuff as well. So, there are modern musicians that we can now look at that perhaps don't have the same barriers as they once had in the past. But again, those stories about about them is what I want to get across to children. And whether it is gender or whether it's, like I said, disability or race or age, so it's thinking about those protected characteristics largely from the Equality Act and thinking, okay, so when I had lots of musicians, it was like, well, what can children really hook onto here? What is the thing that is going to inspire them? And to pull that out of the musician, because I think what tends to happen in schools is, particularly when they're doing music lessons and doing schemes of work from particular resources, is to look at the music style and not the musician. And we don't often do that with other subjects. I think sometimes with writers or poets and all the rest of it, we find out a bit about them as a person, as an author as well. What other books have they written, and where do they come from, and who are they? So I think to focus rather on just the type of music, but actually look at the person, because I think that helps to break down stereotypes as well. So, I've read all of Nate Holder's stuff, and I listened to his podcast that you did with Nate Holder, and he talks a lot, about kind of, when schools do something like African drumming, this meaningless term. Well, actually, the school that I want them to study Babatunde Olatunji instead as a person. Let's look at him as a person. Let's see where he lived, where he grew up, what his influences were, and what he went on to do and what he went on to become. And by humanizing that aspect of traditional music, I've certainly found with doing this with my school and with the other schools that have done it as well, is they are more emotionally invested in that particular music afterwards because of the context that you've put it in. So I think the key to all of this is not the numbers. How many Western, classical musicians have you got? How many, artists that have done 90s indie have you got in your list? It's more about, that story, that humanizing that musician. I've talked for a long time then. Sorry.
No, it's cool, man. It's cool. It's all interesting. So that's fine. If it wasn't, then that would have been so positive. But it was absolutely,
and
fascinating.
I would say as well, although I am the face of this, I have worked alongside, like I've got a diversity lead in the trust that I work in, as well as other musicians, as well as other teachers as well that have kind of supported this process as well.
Right, yeah. So
and
you are listening to people. You're not sat in a room on your own work.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I think it sometimes seems as a whole that music education is generally centred around, probably quite understandably, music itself being the arrangement of sound, and misses out culture as a whole. Right, I think that's a general sort of criticism from most musicians who dabble in education that I have conversations with. That so often is a theme that it's just sort of music education is focused on craft rather than artistry and culture. And I suppose I don't know. I wonder if that's because that stuff that you're talking about, like humanizing things, emotional things, political things, I don't know, fashion even, the sort of artifacts around music, they're not measurable things, are they? They're not sort of tangible, identifiable things that can be sort of ticked off in a list or examined.
And I think part of the problem of music is that compartmentalising of, particularly where I work in a primary school, everything has become compartmentalised so much. That's because it can therefore be assessed, and it's almost like primary schools are becoming these little mini secondary schools where they pack their books and they go off to their geography lesson, and they pack their books and they go off to their music lesson. And that compartmentalisation, I think, ends up meaning like back when I was in primary school, so this was in the 80s, and I left primary school in, I think it was 1992, just after the national curriculum landed, that there did feel much more like music was just part of the culture of the school. And I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that it was a diverse musical culture within the school, but it didn't feel like music was a completely separate thing, you know. When I moved to,
was it because it was like interwoven and the kids were like participating and it was alive?
Yes, and it just felt like, well, actually, if we're going to do music, we can do it whenever, and we can integrate it into this lesson here, or do a bit of singing here, and in class do a bit of this, and sort of see where your topic kind of goes. That more holistic kind of like topic approach, I suppose. Now, the problem with that, of course, is probably you didn't necessarily get particularly great music teaching all the time. But
well, that's really interesting, man, to say that it's not particularly great music teaching. Because like from my perspective and feel of music education currently, because it changes wildly depending on who I just last spoke to for this, but is that especially in primary school level, that is all it should be. It's just participation and enjoyment. And so many music educators can be more negative anyway by forcing technicalities and craft onto kids.
And I remember going to secondary school, and it was kind of here are some Casio keyboards, and I was just turned off, and I just didn't pursue music after that. Now, it wasn't until I was 18 when I picked up a guitar, and I played guitar with my brother, and I got into a band, and we started to support bands, and actually I had a sort of great mini side life of being in a band and all that stuff. But that was all nothing to do with my schooling. That was entirely to do with music as a pleasurable thing. And one of the big things at the moment, because my other side of what I do and what I'm passionate about is reading, and reading for pleasure there's so much research now to show that just reading for pleasure and getting kids who want to read will actually help them read. You know, it's not rocket science. Getting them to love reading will make them read more. And I think what's happening, certainly with music, is, you know, are we turning those kids off? Are we saying that, well, when you're educated about music, it has to be the notation and all the vocabulary and all of that? Well, if that's what music is, then that stopped me wanting to learn it, and I never did. So the idea of what I'm trying to do here is not it doesn't replace a curriculum. If schools still got a curriculum, they still carry on that music curriculum. But what this does is it creates an umbrella in which the whole school can participate at the same time. So there's an assembly, there's, music on during lesson times. There's lessons that I've provided, but they're not necessarily to be done in music time. It might be a little bit of reading, it might be a little bit of geography activity linked to that particular musician, it might be a listening and respond activity, or comparing a song by one particular artist and a cover version by a different artist. And so the other thing that's worked really nicely as well is I've created home information sheets that go home each month with QR code playlists and a little bit of information, and also a book spine. So are there some books linked to that particular musician or the country where they're from, or something about that musician that we can kind of, hook onto in terms of children's books as well. So those are going home, and we're getting great feedback about the fact that children are not just listening to it at school, they're actually sticking on the QR code and having a listen at home. And I think the idea is to actually bring a little bit more of pleasure to music as a whole school and as a whole school approach, rather than, like we've talked about, that compartmentalizing of music.
I mean, you said at the beginning that when you originally saw someone offering Composer of the Week or whatever, and just seeing how hugely successful it was, but how absurd it was that it was so simplistic. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was because, that's amazing, that's so simplistic. But so much value comes out of just that. I guess you're just guiding students to, look over there, look at that, let's examine that and interact with that. Is really cool that it is from such a simple idea. To go back a little bit to the 40% thing with Western classical, by again jumping forward to you wanting 50-50 male and female, and because we're acknowledging there was less known female Western classical composers, that then obviously reshapes what you're presenting. You end up offering, you said, one sort of Western classical composer a term.
Yeah.
Which is quite, I mean, that's big, man. That's strong to go down. So that's 3 a year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, I feel like we shouldn't skip over that, because that's huge. That's bold. That's really bold. Because I tend to have lots of lovely conversations like this, and it's all about decolonizing curriculum, or I'm a contemporary musician. I'm not a classical person, if you like. But then when I interact in the music ed world or go into schools, I notice that the balance is definitely still much higher for Western classical in that sense. I mean, it's just so integrated into our culture, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, like I said before, it doesn't replace a school's curriculum. So if they're following a scheme of work, they're going to be following that scheme of work. This is just something that goes over the top, and allows children to experience other parts of the world. And the school that I worked in, the kids there, some never went out of Nottingham. Some never went to explore more than their street. We have other children that might fly off to various destinations around the world. And I think it's our responsibility to show children in a world that is becoming more and more globalized that you can simply travel around the world at the click of a button. And it's our responsibility to show children what the world looks like beyond just a geography lesson, So, for example, like I said before, the links that I have with music and literacy are quite strong. So I'm working with some schools and my current school as well about, again, diversifying the reading curriculum and going, well, where in the world can we take our children? Does it always have to be in your city and in your town, or can we go somewhere else? Can we find a story that's set, in a totally different country with different traditions that can still give us what we need in terms of literacy, but also open our eyes to the world around us. And I think music is such a huge, subject in which we can draw from globally, and open up the minds of the children that we teach to what else is out there. But also, there's going to be one child in every classroom that doesn't feel represented, that doesn't feel like, well, I can't see myself here, so this isn't for me. And it's our job as educators to find something or someone that every child can, hold on to and say, oh, that's relevant for me. So even now, when I look at the list of pop musicians that we've kind of got on there, what I'd like to do to, again, make this more interesting, the modern music curriculum was very, very, all those that list of pop artists were pretty much all from either America or the UK. And actually, while pop music doesn't just exist in the UK and in the USA, pop music exists all around the world, so whether it's, more popular over here, like some of the South Korean K-pop stuff, but there's going to be a popular musician in every country that we can learn from. So I think even that in itself, in the modern music curriculum, yes, we want to be teaching about, where jazz came from and blues, and we want to be looking at all of those kind of things, but there's scope to travel the world, I think, and we can bring that to every child.
And your what, I know it's not a curriculum as such, or maybe you would term it as, but your listening list, if you like, is completely valid to be completely followed as a curriculum though, right? Because the model music curriculum is just that. It is a model, isn't it? And even though I certainly realise that from lots of conversations around it, it's just to understand that here is a possible listening list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's no reason why, just because that is offering 40% classical, that it should be that, which is exciting, because to live in a country with a system, if you like, that's open enough to do that, isn't it? And I suppose, I don't know, maybe it was important for what the government offered to be slightly slanted towards classical, to sort of ease in, rather than just being this sort of massively opposed, because that is the culture, isn't it? It's really easy to forget that Western classical was not even the centre. That's just all music. That's all what music education was in this country till, I don't know, man, like it's only like 10 years maybe that's really started to change. Only 5 years that now all of a sudden everyone you speak to now is completely believing that they've always completely represented all genders and all ethnicities through, and that's just not the case, is it? Because we're all a product of the information that we've been given. It's only maybe very recently that we feel like, I don't know, comfortable to, or maybe it's just the internet as well, right? Because you can then go and find that out, because we're not relying on books, essentially. Do you think that's fair to say? Just that sort of, the great tool of the internet is actually giving us the ability to move away from just being, dead white guys and go, oh yeah, there's this whole world there. Like,
absolutely. And like I said, like earlier, you can travel the world at the click of a button now, and you can find so much out so quickly.
Because that's just not possible before, is it? There
are problems with the internet, and there's problems with social media, and there's problems with
some problems with the internet,
discourse, and some of the things that are said, and you can end up hearing things you don't want to hear, and all the rest of it. But it's now a tool that has opened the world up more than anything else. But the whole process of globalization, has been going on for a long time, and I think just the internet has been a catalyst for that. And you'll always get countries that don't want to, that want to close themselves off a little bit, or even schools maybe that want to do that. And I just think it feels inevitable. It feels like, and as an educator, I'm sure all educators will agree, the amount of joy that, whether it's music or whatever, that you can now watch at the click of a button from around the world and learn about. I've just been, endlessly watching different musicians on YouTube from all around the world for a long, long time. And yeah, I think it's brilliant. And I think hopefully that this is, and what I've produced is a step forward, not a step backwards. And the aim is to continue stepping forward and to create something that ideally, eventually is truly global, in terms of what we're offering.
I know. So Matt, I write guitar tuition books, and the last one that I did was like a introduction to fingerstyle guitar itself. So the first lessons in it, which was an opportunity essentially to show someone who's never even heard about fingerstyle guitar to sort of have a journey into it. So it kind of came with a similar responsibility to what you have there. A bit tricky in the sense of, I know it might be because fingerstyle is a sort of a style. It's got the word style in it. So you would think that the choices are less, but actually that particular style itself sort of spans the world, musical cultures, genders, ethnicity. So in writing that, And I was very much, immediately in a pickle of, okay, well, who are the artists that I'm going to choose as presenting as this is what you should learn? And, my go-to was, of course, okay, well, the internet. Let's go and see what other people are saying. And I guess what I quickly realised was like going into forums around fingerstyle guitar to see what other people are saying, what they've learned, rather than me just presenting these are the pieces that I learned, was still that those people talking about what they learned was quite similar to me. Do you know what I mean? So that sort of bias or biases, if you like, was still just being put on the internet in the same way. So it took like that awareness, that consciousness of okay, I have to stand back and view it even more critically to be able to sort of pick things that maybe haven't been put there, because again, it's that you're the product of what you've been given, and you have to look deeper, don't you? Essentially.
Yeah, I absolutely, totally agree with that. And like I said, that's why that's why it's important not only to do your own research and to read as much as you can, but also to talk to other people that might be supportive and helpful in that process. And like I said, when I started out, there was definitely the only sense of responsibility I had was for the children in my school, and eventually now that sense of responsibility is now. Well, it's with nearly 400 schools and potentially growing. So, one of the things that I do as well is ask schools, their opinions. What do they think? How do they think it's going? What would they like to see? What would you like to see changed? So asking the people that you're providing it to as well is important. But at the same time, being able to kind of, speak to a variety of people that might be able to support is useful, as well as schools themselves.
Well, what about the idea of that you're sort of dealing with icons essentially as well? That sort of presentation of a person and the sort of fallible parts that come with those people, because that's also what we're experiencing right now. It's like if you put anyone in the limelight from 50 years ago, there's probably, I'm probably going to get shot for saying this, but there's elements of racism, of homophobia, of sexism. It's got
absolutely.
to be there, right?
Well,
views change.
I think it's interesting because I did have those conversations with some teachers actually. Who there was one that wasn't particularly keen on me having Elvis Presley in there, because allegedly in the past he might have said something that had racist overtones, or was quoted as having said something racist, and so I actually looked into that, and it kind of didn't lead to anything, and this kind of idea was kind of debunked, but
wouldn't it be fair to assume that Elvis Presley, even if you took the race element out of it and went with something like sexism, which I think is almost easier to sort of dissect, isn't it? So the idea of a man and woman in a marriage and roles and things like that we might see him as like extremely sexist, but actually, like, hold on a minute, we're almost knocking on like 80 years ago, aren't we? 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean, just the difference in ideas are just so extreme there. We've got to be able to accept that Elvis Presley was definitely gonna be pretty sexist. We're not gonna have like a string of Jeremy Corbyns, are we? Do you know what I mean?
No,
in that sort of sense. Or like...
and again, it comes to okay, like there's certain musicians that are icons and that have pushed the genre forward. But whilst having Elvis Presley, I was very keen to have Sister Rosetta Tharpe beforehand, so that all that influence and where Elvis comes from is kind of musically talked about beforehand as well. And then when you study that person in more depth, you kind of get that understanding. And, there's things like, Jimi Hendrix, who, do we tell 5-year-olds that he died of a drug overdose in Key Stage 1? No, we don't, do we? Why would we do that? But in Key Stage 2, by the end of year 6, that might be something that you mention, whether it's, Lord Kitchener, for example, and what he stood for and what he did, and his story is fantastic. And you've got his songs, and there are some songs that are definitely not appropriate. So it's kind of like, they're adults. We're dealing with adults in the music industry here. Unless they're someone that I think, that there has to be a line. There has to be a line where you think, actually, we can't really use that person, because of whatever reasons, Michael Jackson, for example, might be one of those people that doesn't appear on the list because of the allegations and various other things, but he's a giant
but he
icon,
does he does crop up though, right, in music education still, various scenarios, and
it's hard to know where that line is. You've got someone like James Brown who was fundamental in music and funk and soul, but then his legacy was marred a little bit with physical violence and arrests and all the rest of it. So
right.
I think you just have to have that knowledge of, well, we're going to choose musicians that perhaps there isn't so much of a line that they've crossed, but then, like you said about Elvis 80 years ago, well, what will happen in 50 years, 60 years, 70 years time to the musicians that we put on a pedestal now, and how the cultural differences might shift from now to then. And that's why I think what I'm producing, it will always be a fluid thing. That might mean that some musicians come and some go, but I think there does have to be a level of understanding as well from a teacher's perspective and from a resource perspective, that these are adults we're dealing with and none of them are perfect, and they have got pitfalls. Some of those pitfalls could be shared, whereas perhaps others you wouldn't necessarily share about their life. So that's kind of where I stand with that, really.
I suppose sometimes it's just the time as well, isn't it, in the context of society at that time. So if we're learning about Elvis and talking about sexism, for example, this is how generally American society functions. This is the life of a middle class woman. This is a life of someone who isn't white. This is how it sort of functions then.
Yeah, they are the product of their time, as we are now, I suppose.
Because I think that was always an experience of classical music for me. When I learnt about classical music as a kid, there was never any context of how it functioned, even in how it was performed. I didn't really have any understanding of how, like, who was accessing, like, a Beethoven concert. Like, where was everyone in the street like, oh, Beethoven's playing down the road, like, oh, shall we all go down? That'd be great, yeah. Oh, we can't afford the tickets, I'm afraid. All that historical context is quite important, isn't it? And that's probably why it's been so problematic, particularly for classical, maybe, because it was so separate from general culture, and that's what almost one of the reasons why it feels so uncomfortable, I suppose, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely, and I completely empathise with that view about classical music as well. It always felt out of reach. I mean, my dad was he plays guitar, but when I was a kid, he did play a lot of classical music, but I never really understood why and what that might look like in real life. But now, now you've got kids that are joining ensembles and they're going to, concerts in stadiums where they can all play together and they can see what that looks like. And I think we've come a long way to support children in their knowledge and understanding of what an orchestra is and what that looks like and how you can join in. Whether that's the most important aspect of learning music is a totally different conversation, I suppose. But again, let's say, for example, so one of our musicians is Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan from Pakistan, who sang Qawwali sort of, religious music. And to just say to children, we're just going to do this type of music this month, you'd automatically be creating that void between you and the music, I think, and just going, well, what can they hook onto here when we're just listening to that? But if we look at the person and we look at what they did, and we find out that he was invited over to, the WOMAD festival in 1985, and he performed in England, and this was his following, and this is what it means to him as a person. And you look back at his life, and I think he first started. His first concert was actually, I think, his father's funeral, where his voice kind of echoed out, and everyone was kind of like, wow,
tough gig, man.
Yeah, him and Jeff Buckley, I think, was another one. So it's bridging that cultural difference, and I think, for me, I think people do that. The only thing that can bridge that gap is a person and their life and who they are, and as well as
because that's a universal thing, right? As well, that's because you're not using the culture, because that's not universal. That's completely totally alien by its definition. But person's a person. That's it. You understand that person.
That's it. And I think by introducing the person, the aim is to bridge those gaps and to make children more understanding. That I'm not saying they have to like all of these types of music. That's a byproduct of studying it, hopefully. But if they don't like it, perhaps they'll understand it. Perhaps when they hear it, it won't feel alien to them. It won't feel like music from somewhere that they don't understand, that actually they've heard it before, they've got a story behind it, and they can talk about someone that they know linked to those musicians. So I think that's key to it, really.
Amazing. Wonderful chat. Thanks, man. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much to Soundstorm and our sponsor, Longy School of Music, for making this episode possible. And thank you so much to you for listening.